as they cried out in discontent and grief. May our protector Zeus, for his name's sake, shield our Cadmean town from all such ills. But now you men, and I mean those who still have not reached full maturity, and those whom time has taken past their finest years, but yet whose ample bodies are still strong, as well as those now in their prime of life, as is quite reasonable, all you men must help to save the city and the altars of your country's gods, so that for the children and their most cherished nurse, our Mother Earth, the honors due to them are not destroyed. For she was the one who took the trouble to give you all your childish nourishment when you were infants. She raised you and trusted you to live in houses here and carry shields so you would stand by her when she required your help. We have been besieged, but thanks to the will of the gods, the city has, for the most part, coped with war quite well. But now the prophet, tending flocks of birds, who with his ears and his intelligence and his unerring skill interprets omens his birds provide without the use of fire, has told us that in the night assembly, Achaeans are now planning an assault, their greatest yet, to overwhelm our city. So all of you must move, and with all speed, to battlements and gates within the walls. Go there with all your armor. Fully man the parapets, take up your positions on tower platforms, and then, once in place, wait there bravely for the gates to open. I have sent out spies to scout their army, men whom I trust to carry out the task. When I hear from them, I will not be caught by any tricks our enemies might try.
Hi, welcome to Reading Greek Tragedy Online. I'm Joel Christensen from Brandeis University, and I'm here with the Center for Hellenic Studies and Out of Chaos Theater to bring you our weekly forays into the reading and performance of ancient Greek tragedy. This week, we bring you Aeschylus's Seven Against Thebes, with the great task of some of our regulars, Tim DeLapp as Eteocles, Hannah Barry and Paul Mahoney, Sarah Valentine as the messenger, Tabitha Gale and Evelyn Miller, and a special guest today, Naomi Weiss. The Seven Against Thebes is one of those classic plays you hear about, and you know you have to read because it's from Thebes, that other major city in Greek myth. And Thebes is where the Age of Heroes begins to find its extinction, and it's one of the most famous tales of besieged cities apart from the other city, Troy. And the tale of the Seven Against Thebes is part of the Oedipus story, following on from his departure from the city and the cursing of his sons. We have records of a famous epic which told the tale, the Lost Thebais, but Aeschylus's version is our first or earliest extant full text dedicated to the struggle between Eteocles and his brother Polynices. Sophocles and Euripides will provide their own versions of the story, focusing in parts on different aspects. And Aeschylus's account takes us from the anticipation right before the battle through the conflict over burying the brothers, more well known from Sophocles' Antigone. It was produced around 467 BCE as part of a trilogy dedicated to the family of Oedipus, apparently focusing on the men in each generation, one to Laius, one to Oedipus, and then one to these sons. And the bulk of this play is a run-up to the action, the description of where everybody is assigned in battle, and all of the focus comes on sort of the language and the motivation here of Eteocles. So I'm happy to have Naomi here because she has specialty not only in the performance of this play, but in perhaps making this play sensible. Naomi, let's start with a few questions, an easy one. If you were teaching this play in a class, what are a couple things people need to know to make sense of it?
It's lovely to be here. Thank you. A couple of things. Well, one thing is to just position this play within Aeschylus's own career. So it dates to 467 BCE. That means it's the second eldest surviving Greek tragedy that we have, the oldest being Persians, which was performed about 5 years previously. One of the things that's quite distinct about quite a few of Aeschylus's plays is that they were performed, all tragedies were performed as part of tetralogies, meaning a trilogy of tragedies followed by a satyr play. But one of the things that's distinctive about quite a lot of Aeschylus's tetralogies is that the plays are very closely connected to one another. So just following on from some of the details you just provided, this play, The Seven Against Thebes, is the third play in a tetralogy. The audience would have heard and seen the play Laius and the play Oedipus prior to this one, which would remind them of the well-known Oedipus story. That is the fact that Oedipus unwittingly, of course, kills his father. Laius marries his mother, Jocasta, and when that all comes to light, he doesn't just blind himself and curse himself, but at least according to the version that we have here, he curses his two sons, Eteocles and Polynices. And that curse is that they are going to battle each other over the city of Thebes. And as it turns out, they start ruling reasonably, they start with the idea that they're going to rule reasonably happily in alternate years, but Eteocles likes power too much, and Polynices ends up going out of the city, raising an army, and attacking with an Argive army his own native city of Thebes. So that's a sort of mythological background, as well as the position in Aeschylus's career. It's a really difficult play in many ways, above all because of a very long scene that we're going to encounter quite soon, which involves a series of descriptions of shields. But one of the things I like people to think about when they approach this play is how the action is presented to us. We are used, and I'm sure the viewers of this stream are used to sort of the typical messenger speech where a big action takes place off stage, and then it's all reported to us once it has happened. Here, the action that's going to come is sort of overdetermined. It's constantly prefigured, described, alluded to in the language and in the performance of the various characters in the play. That is the duel between the two brothers, Eteocles and Polynices. And that effectively constitutes the action, this prefiguring of their fight to the death.
So, and that's one of the major differences between sort of ancient theatrics and plot and modern ones, which is that we go to a movie or a play and we expect the unexpected, right? We don't know what's going on. But in the ancient plays, you knew the basic outcome. And in this play especially, I like the way you mentioned it. I mean, everybody knows that Polynices and Eteocles both die, right? There's no variant where one gets away and then lives happily ever after. So part of the suspense is how we get from this opening to there and what we do along the way. Now, I know one of your interests is in how a play like this was performed in its original context. So when I read this play, it's Eteocles and friends describing a bunch of things that's happening off stage. How was this performed in sort of a gripping way on the Athenian stage? Or am I approaching it with the wrong types of questions?
No, I think they're absolutely the right kinds of questions, because we're used to reading a play on a page, or I mean, having this amazing kind of performance that we have here, but typically it's all spoken. The key thing to remember about Greek tragedy is that so much of it was sung and danced, and the contrast and combination of speech on the one hand and song and dance on the other can be used for really great, powerful effects. And I think this play is perhaps the best example of that in the entire tragic corpus. So we haven't had it yet, but so far we've had Eteocles give this very, very authoritative speech, rallying his men. It's important that they're men. This is a speech for the men, the male citizens of the city, rallying them to defend Thebes. But what's going to come up is the entrance of the chorus, who are not speaking at all, and they're not just singing, but they're going to be, in the original production and in the Greek text, they're singing in a really chaotic, frenetic way, sort of bringing in the confusion that they describe. So the speech of Eteocles and the singing and also the dancing of the original Greek chorus immediately sets up a very, very striking contrast, which Eteocles, as we'll see, draws our attention to over and over again. You're on mute.
Sorry, my children started yelling in the background, so I tried to insulate us to that. So one of the things we forget all the time is how much music is important to ancient tragedy, right? As we've talked about before, it's closer to Bollywood than it is to film noir. And so our aesthetics are all over the place. So in between the break, I'll have thought more about what this scene would be like with chorus and music, and I'll ask you about it. But now we'll move to the first scene. So in between the cold opening we just had and the first scene, a messenger enters, bringing Eteocles news from beyond the walls. 7 of the enemy's finest have sacrificed a bull and sworn by its blood to devastate the town and empty it. He advises Eteocles to place 1 Theban warrior for each of the Argive 7 at the gates around the city. Eteocles makes a prayer to the gods and exits the scene, leaving the chorus to enter in distress.
Filled with terror, I scream out in grief.
Their forces flood our walls.
A massive horde of mountain warriors quickly threatening to engulf us all.
The dust-filled air I see around us confirms the facts for me. That voiceless messenger's report is simple, clear, and true.
Horses' hooves are trampling my native soil. My ears can hear the noise as it flies here and there. The roar of an unbridled river crashing down on mountain rocks.
Oh, all you gods and goddesses, save us. Raise your shouts high above our city walls to turn aside this charging, deadly tide.
An army of white shields with weapons raised has launched a full assault against our walls. Their forces pushing our defenders back.
Oh, you blessed ones above, seated on your thrones, the moment now has come for us when we must clutch your images.
Why waste our time in useless wailing? Do you not hear that noise? That din of clashing shields?
What will you do, O Ares? Will you betray the land where you have lived since ancient times?
Oh, God, with the helmet all of gold, look down upon our city, which once you loved so well.
Come, all you gods who guard our state, defenders of our land, gaze down on us, a group of young girls pleading they will never be enslaved, while waves of nodding helmet plumes driven by blasts from war god Ares smash on our city walls.
Oh, Father Zeus, who brings all things to their fulfillment, protect us all from enemy hands.
And 7 warriors, preeminent spearmen in that army, stand fully armed at their allotted posts before the 7 gates.
And you, oh Pallas, you Zeus-born power who delights in war, become the savior of our city.
And you, Poseidon, Lord of horses, king of the sea, with that fish-spearing weapon of yours, release us from this fear and bring us some relief.
You too, Ares, alas for us. Preserve the place which carries Cadmus' name and openly display your kinship to him.
And you, Cypris, first mother of our race, protect us, for every one of us is born from your own blood.
And you, Apollo, Lord of the wolf, become a wolf, and with your howls drive back our enemies. And you too, Artemis, beloved child of Leto, prepare to shoot your bow.
Alas, alas, I hear the rattling din of chariots moving round our city.
Oh, Lady Hera, the wheels are creaking as they bear the axle's heavy load.
Alas,
Alas!
alas! Beloved Artemis, the frantic air is trembling as the battle spears fly past.
Oh dear Apollo, the bronze shields clash before our very gates. Oh child of Zeus, who has the sacred power to sway the outcome of a fight.
Oh, listen. Oh, listen. As we young women stretch our hands and offer up these righteous prayers.
Oh, dearest spirits above, surround our city. Rescue us and demonstrate your love.
You there, you insufferable creatures. I ask you, is this the most useful way to save our city and encourage our men when they're being attacked right here? You fling yourselves at statues of the gods who guard the city and then scream and howl, acts which decent people find offensive. Whether in misfortune or in better days, I hope I never share my loving home with any female. When a woman is strong, her boldness makes one shun her company. But when she is afraid, she is even worse, at home and in the town. And now your shrieks and running around, flying here and there, have spread a spirit of craven cowardice among the citizens. The finest way to help our enemies outside these walls, while those inside the town are overwhelmed by their own people. This is what happens when you live with women. So now, if anyone, male or female or something in between, fails to acknowledge my authority, we'll have a vote to sentence him to death, and there is no way at all he will escape. The people's hands will stone him. What goes on outside the home is the concern of men. Let woman play no part in such affairs. She should remain inside and not cause trouble. Are you women listening to me or not?
Dear son of Oedipus, I was afraid. I heard the noise of rattling chariots, grating axle hubs on spinning wheels, the screaming coming from the horses' mouths with harnessed bits of fire-hot iron.
That made you flee. When a ship is labouring in heavy seas, has any sailor ever found a way to save himself by running off from stern to prow?
But I rushed to the gods, our ancient images, and put my trust in them as deadly hailstones hammered on our gates.
You should pray the wall holds out against those enemy spears. If so, that will of course be the work of gods. But then they say that when a town is seized, its gods abandon it.
This group of gods, never in my life may they desert me.
When you call on gods, do not act foolishly, for as they say, obedience is the mother of success, and success the wife of preservation.
Yes, that is true. But the power of gods is even higher still. When times are bad, it often helps. It lifts a helpless woman up out of her wretched misery and pain, with storm clouds hovering above her eyes.
When we are struggling with our enemies, it is up to the men to carry out our sacrifice and offerings to the gods. A woman's duty is to hold her tongue and stay inside the home. I bear you no ill will for worshipping whatever higher spirit you may wish. And as long as you do not discourage your fellow citizens, you can relax and stop being so afraid. If you find out that men are being killed or suffering from wounds, do not react with screams of such distress, for food like this feeds Ares, god of war, with human blood.
Wait! I hear horses snorting.
What you hear is clear enough, but you should not respond to what you hear with this excess.
A rumble is coming from the ground, as if those beasts are moving all around us.
I have plans to deal with them. Is that not sufficient?
I am afraid the hammering at the gates is getting worse.
Why can't you keep quiet? Do not talk like this within the city.
Oh, you divine company of gods, do not allow our fortress to be seized.
Stupid women, keep your mouths shut tight and just put up with it.
Oh, mighty Zeus, let your blows fall upon your enemies.
Oh, Zeus, what a breed you have created by giving us these women.
As sad a breed as men whose city has been overwhelmed.
How can you speak such ominous words while clinging to a sacred statue?
My courage is gone. Fear has seized my tongue.
What I ask of you is easy to provide, a simple thing to do.
Tell us what that is as quickly as you can. I will soon know if I can do it.
Do not speak at all. You wretched women, do not make your friends so frightened.
I will not say a thing. I must share the fate of all the others.
Compared to how you spoke out earlier, I find these words of yours acceptable. But in addition to this, stay away from statues of the gods and make your prayers that the gods fight on our side more forceful. When you have heard my vow, then you must sing for victory. That joyful, sacred cry, the holy shout we Greeks by custom raise to cheer our friends and take away the fear they have of fighting war. And now I speak to the gods who live in our own city, those dwelling in the plain, and those who watch our marketplace, and to our native streams, the springs of Dirce, the river Ismenus. To all these, I swear that if we do succeed and save the city, we will dye blood red the altars of the gods, with butchered sheep and offer sacrificial bulls to them. That is the way you should pray to the gods, without the screaming you enjoy so much, or all that uncontrolled and futile wailing.
So one of the things that I find really moving and remarkable about what we just saw is the energy and even the contemporaneous feeling of the scene. Eteocles there is really powerful, and he speaks much more quickly than I can recite lines from Aeschylus. But the chorus there is really emotionally moving. Naomi, can you talk a little bit about how some of the original performance aspects would have increased the emotional portion of it?
Yes, with pleasure. So choruses typically, they don't just sing in Greek tragedy, they can speak, but they above all sing. But they typically sing in quite a structured way, whereby there'll be one stanza that's matched in rhythm by another stanza, and that's called strophic song. What's really striking about the chorus's entrance here is that in the Greek, the initial part of their singing is astrophic. The rhythm is all over the place. It's also full of what we call resolutions, which basically means that there are lots of short syllables, a sort of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's very fast. So the performance, we don't know what the tune was, but we can have some sense of the rhythm. We know that this kind of entrance of a chorus is often called sporadane, meaning that they gradually come on. It's not like one uniform body, nice and ordered. They're coming in from probably different directions, so that their bodily movements and their sound mimics the confusion, the chaos that they are communicating with their words. So that's a really important aspect here, and the dance is really important too. This is an incredibly noisy performance. The words of the chorus are full of references to the clashing of shields, the snorting of horses, the creaking of the axles of the chariots, the rattling. That they're so terrified by the approach of the Argive army that they are essentially bringing it on stage through their own performance. It's not just through their own real vivid language by describing all of these things, but with their very frenetic song and dance, which calms down a little bit and becomes strophic and more orderly, but not that much. And then through we can only imagine what their choreography would involve. But given all the references to beating and sort of stomping, words like ktupos, which means not just sound but beat, you can imagine them, beating their bodies or stamping the ground with their feet. Again, with their performance, bringing a sense of this army, which hasn't actually invaded yet. The seven warriors who are going to be, the seven Theban warriors who are going to be stationed against the seven Argive warriors aren't there yet. But it's almost as if the battle has begun, and that's produced through the women's singing and dancing bodies.
So one of the things I struggle to try to understand is how different the emotional uptake of this would have been for ancient audiences. And so I always try to sort of recenter the historical context. So if we're in 467, we're within historical memory of most of the audience of the city of Athens being attacked and sacked. Right? How do you think that sort of experience shaped their reception of the beginning of this play, especially this conflict between the raw emotion of the chorus and the focus and confidence of Eteocles?
Yeah, certainly for a lot of the audience, the sack of their own city must have been a very poignant memory. So it's an especially difficult but also vivid thing to imagine and to sort of relive on stage. It's rendered a little bit more complicated here because whereas that was a clear Greek versus Persian conflict, here it's Greek against Greek, which some people have thought might suggest or point to internal conflicts amongst Greek allies. But certainly that backdrop is really important to consider, contrasting it especially to our audience here who don't really have that kind of sense at all of an imminent battle beyond the walls.
No, and one more question before we turn to the next scene. I'm struck by the, for lack of a better word, muscular rhetoric that Eteocles flexes here, especially sort of the real strong misogynistic strain in his characterization of the women's panic. Should we see this as just sort of general Greek misogyny, or is there something going on here as well when combined with the whole Oedipal narrative? Sorry, that was, I didn't prep you for that one. I'm just throwing this out there.
That's okay.
He seems really fierce.
He seems really fierce, and I mean, if Sophocles is anything to go by, Oedipus too gets a bit carried away in his ferocity. Who knows how that was played out in Aeschylus's version. But the gender dynamics are very, very striking here. And they go hand in hand with the chaotic feel of the chorus's performance, because Eteocles, he's been this very authoritative speaker, not singer, from the very beginning, and is speaking to the men, but then he's left with the woman, the chorus, and is just constantly trying to control them. He says, "Be silent, be silent, be silent." And of course they're not. Even when they say they're going to be, they actually follow this scene with yet another song where they're very emotional all over again. We can see Eteocles certainly in against a long tradition of misogyny. I mean, some of his statements seem right out of Hesiod, the archaic Greek poet, talking about women as basically a whole other race, a breed separate from men. I wish I could just live without them. But we shouldn't take this quite at face value in terms of the ideology of the play itself, because as we'll see, the dynamic between Eteocles and the chorus changes. He's trying to restrain them. Later, they're going to try to restrain him. And the other thing to note is that, you know, for all of his great display of authority, he's failing. He's unable to control these women. Yeah,
and I think definitely when we get to the end of the play and the burial rites, women take a different kind of center stage. So in the scene we just saw, Eteocles exits once more, and the chorus finds themselves comforted, but not much. They sing their fears, they talk about capture, they do the song and dance that Naomi talked about. They mention their fear of death, of assault, fear of watching their friends and family in the city be brought to ruin. And then we get the messenger coming to give us
I have confirmed the details, and I can speak of what our enemies are doing out there. How every champion, according to his lot, has been assigned his place. For some time now, Titius has been stationed at the Proteus Gate, making huge noise. For Amphiaraus, the prophet, will not let him cross the ford of the Ismenus River. The omens from the sacrifice are inauspicious, but Titius, in a rage and thirsting for a fight, keeps making hissing noises like a snake at noon and accusing him, saying that Aclaeus' son, the prophet, a clever man, desires to shirk his fate and has no spirit for the coming fight. He shouts these taunts and shakes his helmet plumes, 3 overarching crests, while from his shield, bells made of bronze and hanging underneath make a fearful sound. And on that shield, he bears an arrogant sign, a fiery sky patterned with lesser stars and a full moon, the most revered of stars, the eye of night, shining from the bright center of the shield. Roaming there with his conceited armor, in his eagerness to fight, he bellows at the river banks, just like a war horse fiercely champing at the bit and snorting as it awaits the trumpet's call.
Those trappings a man carries will never frighten me. Mere emblems have no power to wound, for helmet, crests, and bells lack any bite without a spear. And this knight you talk of, which happens to be painted on the shield, a heavenly sky glittering with stars, such foolishness might prompt a certain man to make predictions. If Tydeus dies and night falls on his eyes, then this proud sign will for its bearer prove quite true and just, for it will indicate that he is dead. As for me, I will set the trusty son of Astacus to combat Tydeus and hold the gate. Descended from a noble line, he honors the throne of self-restraint and hates proud speech. His family roots are with those warriors born from the dragon's teeth whom Ares spared. So Melanippus comes of homegrown stock, a true son of this soil.
May the gods grant him success. The lot was drawn for the Electron Gate, and it picked out a giant of a man, Capaneus, a Greek warrior greater than the one I talked about before. He says he will destroy our citadel with or without permission of the gods, boasting that even if Zeus's daughter descended to the plain and blocked his way, she could not hold him back. And he declares her thunderbolts and lightning are no more than noontime heat. The symbol on his shield depicts a naked man who carries fire, 2 flaming torches ready in his hands, and an inscription in gold lettering announcing, "I will burn down the city."
This man's bragging works to our advantage, the way the first man's did. For people's tongues betray the truth of their unholy thoughts. As Capaneus makes his threats, he stands prepared to act, dishonoring the gods. His mouth is always shouting empty jibes, and though a mortal man, he hurls up loud and swollen boasts to Zeus in heaven. I trust a just and fiery thunderbolt will fall on him, and when it does, the heat will not feel like a painted noonday sun. Against this man, we will set Polyphontes. Although he likes to talk, he is a mighty fighter with a fiery spirit, with goodwill from our guardian, Artemis, and other gods. We can rely on him.
Now I will describe another warrior selected to attack our walls. When their bronze helmet was turned upside down, the third man's lot jumped out. Eteocles, chosen to hurl his group of warriors against the Naystan Gate. You cannot miss the emblem on his shield. A ladder with a man in armor on it, scaling ramparts of an enemy town he wishes to destroy. And this man too has written letters that announce his boast. Not even war god Ares can dislodge me and hurl me from the wall.
I will dispatch this man without delay, and choosing him is fortunate for us. There, he is being sent. A man who carries what he boasts about in his own hands, Megareus, son of Creon, a seed of that earthborn race.
Another man, a fourth, is now moving up into position at the gate beside Athena Anca, shouting as he goes. Hippomedon, a fighter holding an enormous weapon, his shield, which is embossed with a design circling around the whole circumference. It made me shudder, that I cannot deny. Whoever made the emblem for that shield was no cheap artisan. The figure there is Typhon, his mouth breathing fire with heavy smoke, thick with flaring embers, swift sisters of those flames. Along the rim of the round concave belly of the shield are twisting serpents, holding it in place. The man himself has raised his battle cry and, possessed by Ares, rages for a fight as if he were a follower of Bacchus with a horrific scowl.
Anca Pallas, who lives beside the city near the gate, hates an arrogant boaster, and she will be the first to hold him off, like a venomous snake from her young brood. But we will also pick Hyperbius, the loyal son of Enops, to fight him man to man, for Hyperbius is keen to test his fortune and to learn his fate. In looks, in courage, and in feats of arms, he is beyond reproach. And now Hermes, god of chance, has brought both men together, as is appropriate, for these two men will meet in battle as two enemies, just like the warlike gods on their two shields. The Hippomedon's armor proudly shows a fire-belching Typhon, whereas Hyperbius has Father Zeus erect on both his feet, a flaming lightning bolt gripped in his fist, and no one has yet seen a conquered Zeus.
I well believe. The man opposing Zeus will lose his head before our gates, since on his shield he bears the unloved image of an earthborn spirit.
May he prevail. And now I will describe the warrior selected as the 5th one to attack from his location at the northern gate. He swears by his own spear in which he trusts, believing it more sacred than a god and even more important than his eyes, that he will ravage our Cadmean town in spite of Zeus. These are his very words, this child of a mother born up in the hills, a handsome man, and still a youthful lad with an initial growth of thick, soft hair just showing up on his cheeks. And now he moves with a savage will and terrifying eyes. Nothing about him seems like a young girl, although his name suggests he looks that way. As he moves to his place before the gate, he boasts aloud, and on the circular shield of hammered bronze, he holds in front of him an emblem of our city's shame, the Sphinx, who eats men raw, a symbol held in place with bolts. Skillful piece of work.
Oh, if only the gods would give those men the very things they keep imagining in those sacrilegious boasts they utter. Then they would surely die in misery, completely overwhelmed. We have a man to match this one as well, the Arcadian whom you have just described. Our champion is not a man who brags, but his hand sees what must be done. His name is Actor, a brother of the one I named before. He will not let a man who simply talks and does not act come swarming through the gate to multiply our troubles, or allow any man to pass whose hostile shield depicts an image of that hateful, vicious beast who will complain while still outside the town to the one who carries her towards the gate when she receives a heavy battering below our city walls.
These words of yours have pierced me to the heart. And when I hear the noisy boasts of loud and sinful men, my hair stands up on end. I pray the gods destroy them all and swallow them in earth.
The 6th man I will name is Amphiaraus, a fearful warrior and very wise, an extremely strong, courageous prophet, now in position at the Hemeloid gate. He keeps on shouting many cruel insults at mighty Titius, calling him names like murderer, disturber of the peace, greatest source of trouble for the Argives, summoner of the vengeance of the Furies, willing agent of a general slaughter, and counselor of evil to Adrastus. He also looked up at the skies and cried to your own brother, great Polynices, reproaching him. And in his final words, he twice divided up your brother's name and emphasized each part. When he called out, he used the following words: "This fight of yours will be something pleasing to the gods, a worthy enterprise to hear about and tell in future years, that you destroyed your father's city and your native gods by bringing in an army from outside to attack the place? What sort of justice leads you to choke off that nourishing spring where you were born? And if, because of you, your native land is captured by the spear, how will the country ever be your friend? As for me, I will fatten up the earth, a prophet buried in a hostile soil. So let us go to war. I do not expect to meet a shameful fate." As he said this, the prophet calmly held up his plain bronze shield, a simple circle which displayed no sign, for he does not wish merely to appear the finest warrior. He wants to prove it.
Alas, for those ominous twists of fate which in those groups where men associate combine the righteous and profane together. In all our actions, nothing can be worse than evil company. A reverent man who sails off in a ship manned by a crew of reckless sailors eager to do wrong will sometimes perish with that group of men the gods detest. Or else a virtuous man living with fellow citizens who hate all visitors and disrespect the gods is caught up with them in a common trap, which he does not deserve, and overwhelmed, struck by God's whip which lashes all alike. That's how things will turn out for the prophet. Ecleus' son, a temperate man, just, noble and respectful of the gods, a powerful seer, but now an ally of evil men whose arrogant boasting defies good sense. I do not think he will attack the gate, not from cowardice or lack of spirit, but because he knows he must meet his fate here in this fight. If Apollo's prophecies bear fruit, and usually he stays silent or else says something truly pertinent, but still, I will also appoint a man, great Lasthenes, to keep this foreigner far from our gate. Lasthenes has the wisdom of an older man and a young man's strength. His eyes are quick. His hand does not delay in thrusting with his spear at naked flesh. His enemy's shield has left uncovered, but man's success is given by the gods.
Now, I will announce the 7th warrior beside the 7th and final gate. Your own blood brother. He desires to scale our battlements and then proclaim that he is king of Thebes and raise a cry of triumph when he has seized the city. He prays to meet and kill you in the fight and then to perish by your side, or else, if you survive, to pay you back with exile in the same way you once dishonored him and forced him from his home. With words like these, great Polynices calls his native gods and summons his parental deities to act as close custodians of his prayers. He holds a brand new circular shield displaying 2 shapes skillfully attached, a man in armor made of hammered gold, and behind a woman calmly leading him. She claims to be a figure of justice, to judge what the letters say. This man I will lead back, and he will have his land and will roam free in his ancestral home.
Oh, all this madness brought on by the gods, this great abomination, my family, the race of Oedipus, so full of tears. Now, alas, those curses of my father are fully realized. As for their champion called Polynices, a most appropriate name, we will soon know where that insignia of his will lead, whether those babbling letters stamped in gold on his own shield and his erratic mind will lead him home. If Zeus's virgin daughter Justice were with him in his thoughts and deeds, that might soon come to pass. But as it is, when he came from the dark maternal womb, when he was raised and reached maturity, and when his cheek had its first growth of hair, that goddess never recognized or glanced at him. And now he seeks to hurt his fatherland. I do not think she stands beside him. This I believe. So I will be the one to stand against him. Yes, I will go in person. What other man can say he has a better claim than me? One ruling general against another, a brother against a brother. One foe goes out to stand against another foe.
Son of Oedipus, dearest of all men, do not get angry and be like that man whose name lacks all respect. Cadmeans are going to fight the Argives hand to hand, and that will be enough. The blood they shed, we can atone. But when the men who fight share common blood, as you brothers do, and those who die are killed by their own kin, time never can remove the dreadful stain.
If a man can suffer evil without shame, that is all right. The only benefit the dead receive is honor. However, you cannot speak of glory in those acts which injure him and make him a disgrace.
Why are you so keen to go, my son? Do not let mad delusions from the gods cram your soul with passion for this fight and carry you away.
The gods are driving these events so hard. Let all the race of Laius ride the winds, down waves of Cocytus. That is their lot, since Phoebus hates them so.
But this desire which gnaws at you and drives you on to kill, to slaughter other men unlawfully, that urge yields bitter fruit.
Yes, that is true. My loving father made a dreadful curse, and on my dry, unweeping eyes, his words, those fatal words, still sit and say to me, win something for yourself before you die.
But do not let yourself be driven to it. If you preserve your life by acting well, no one will call you coward, and surely that dark avenging fury with her aegis will quit your house as soon as gods receive a sacrificial gift from your own hands.
The gods abandoned us some time ago, but they respect one gift we offer them, the grace we manifest in dying.
Right now, your fate is standing close to you, but that demon spirit still boiling hot perhaps will alter what it now desires and come on gentler winds.
Yes, those curses Oedipus pronounced have made it seethe.
You should attend to us, although you hate to hear what women say.
Do not go in person, not on that journey to the seventh gate.
A fighting man cannot accept those words.
What you are seeking is to harvest fruit by slaughtering your own blood, brother.
But no one has the power to run away from evils which the gods themselves present.
The goddess who destroys entire homes makes me shake with fear. For this divinity, unlike other gods, always speaks the truth in prophecies of evils yet to come.
That fury, summoned by his father's prayer, will now fulfill those curses earlier which Oedipus in his mad fit pronounced. This child-destroying quarrel drives her on.
But when they both are gone, two brothers slain by one another, and dusty earth has drunk the dark streams of their crimson blood, who then can offer absolution, cleanse their guilt?
That ancient wrong, so swift in its revenge and lasting now 3 generations long. I mean, when Laius, against Apollo's will, when in his Pythian oracle he said the king would save his city if he died without producing children, nonetheless...
Overpowered by folly in his love, created his own fate. His son Oedipus, who killed his father and then lived on to plant his seeds of blood in sacred soil where he was born, in his own mother's womb.
The sea of evil drives its surge ahead. When one wave falls, another rises up, its triple-crested water crashing down around the city's stern, and the defence, which stands between us and the sea, is thin, no wider than a wall.
When the moment comes for ancient curses to be fulfilled, they bring a heavy freight. For deadly threats do not just disappear. The wealth of enterprising merchant men, once grown too gross, must be hurled overboard and cast out from the ship into the sea.
What man has ever been admired so much by gods, by citizens who share our feasts, or by our people's densely packed assemblies, as Oedipus when he was honoured that day he rid the city of the Sphinx, the deadly beast who snatched our men away?
But when his better judgment realised the wretchedness of his ill-fated marriage, the overwhelming pain drove his heart mad, and then he carried out a double evil. With the very hand that killed his father, he stabbed out both his eyes, dearer to him than his own children.
And he cried out against the sons he fathered, assailing them with wild and vengeful words. Alas, those curses from his bitter tongue, which swore that one day both of them, with swords in hands, would slice up his possessions. And now my fear is this, that fury rushes here to see the curse fulfilled.
So one of the things I have enjoyed most about being part of these performances is being proved thoroughly wrong week after week about what I think about the play. I can't speak for you, Naomi, or the audience, but that performance was just riveting. Right, the messengers' presentations of the speeches, and I find myself, as usual, filled with more questions than answers. I want to start, if you'll entertain this, in the end and what they just said, because it makes me think of what was in the other plays and how do we get this moment of Oedipus's curses? Because in the epic fragments, there are different explanations that are completely unclear. Right? Did the sons upset their father by serving him bad meat or food in a golden platter or something. But here it seems that he immediately cursed his sons upon discovering the truth. Where does this sit in sort of the range of interpretations of Oedipus myth for you, Naomi?
Well, that's a kind of difficult question to answer because I tend to think of this play so much as embedded within its own tetralogy and what it has established as the version so far, which really comes to the fore now in the second half. With this song, after this long exchange about the shields, which we'll talk about in a minute, with this song, references to the back history start coming in thick and fast. There are competing different ideas about exactly both how the sons upset Oedipus and the timing of the curse that Oedipus placed on them, although the telling of it here suggests that happened very soon after his own self-blinding.
It would be fascinating if we had the other plays. Now we just have me reading into all the other things I know. So you just mentioned these shields and the symbols upon them. And it's a marvelous sort of performance of ekphrasis, right? But it's not just the images, it's also the inscriptions on them. How familiar would audiences been with this type of sigil making or iconography on shields? And what have they made of these descriptions?
So this is this really difficult, incredibly long scene is full of interpretation. It's a scene of interpretation, which kind of culminates actually in the interpretation of Polynices' own name, Polynices meaning much strife. Because I don't know how clear it is to somebody who hasn't come across this play before exactly what's going on, just to make it very, very clear, there's a series of 7 enemies at the gates presented by the messenger, and all of them have different shields with different images on them, and Eteocles sort of refutes, counters each one. For the most part, Eteocles' response is to basically say those images and I'll mention in a minute, the writing or the speech produced on them count for nothing. That's just babble, that's just words. I've got men who do the deed, who fight with hands, not with words, not with images. So it's a kind of he's the sort of internal interpreter of the symbols that are presented to him by the messenger. These symbols, these images on the shields, have produced so much scholarship because they're so difficult for us to understand. And I think they're not necessarily easy for an ancient audience to understand either, but they might have been somewhat more familiar. So there are a lot of images on ancient Greek Attic vases from around this time and earlier of warriors with shields. And the shields often reflect something about the warrior. So for example, Achilles might appear on a shield which has running feet, and Achilles is known to be swift-footed. You also see, and this is very much the work of French scholar Francois Lissérade, you also see images of shields that in battle are kind of doing the battle work. So you have a warrior throwing a spear, and you'll have on the shield some kind of scary animal, or even like some other warrior in battle. So this kind of use of visual images to sort of augment a battle scene might be much more familiar to an ancient audience than they are to us. So
would be interesting,
sorry,
though,
go ahead.
It would be interesting to say, take World War II veterans of bombing missions and think about the images and words that they put on their planes, right? Because oftentimes they're associative, they're not directly logical, right? And I think it's clear for any modern audience of myth that some of these images are downright hubristic, right? And pretty interesting, but who has time for that, right? I think before we get to the next scene, though, one of the amazing things about this play is, especially the way we've edited it today, is it's really in a bit of a triptych, right? We have the panic and chaos in the beginning, and then we have the scene of the ekphrasis and the description, and the chorus changes radically. Can you talk a little bit about the transition of the chorus and what you think that means?
Yes. So the chorus has said a few things during the description of the shields, and Eteocles then is, of course, the seventh fighter going against his brother, and starts to arm himself. And at that moment, the chorus seeks to restrain him. So this is what I was referring to earlier. In that early scene, Eteocles is desperate to restrain the chorus, which he feels these women are destroying the city from the inside out. Now, actually, there's a role reversal. The women are trying to prevent Eteocles from going out because it's so obvious. Everybody knows what's going to happen, that he's going to meet his doom. In fact, his act is the one that's really fatal, not that of the woman. So the shift here is really striking, and goes with then the departure of Eteocles to his death. We don't hear from him after this.
And we're about to get yet another tonal shift that's even more jarring. So we can talk about that and the stage of Thebes after this final scene. So the chorus sing about their fear for Eteocles and Polynices. They bewail the fate of Thebes and its populace. And then the messenger enters to bring them both good and ill news. The city's saved. 6 of the 7 gates were defended admirably and successfully. But at that 7th gate, Eteocles and Polynices have killed each other. The chorus mourn as the funeral processions come their way, and both brothers are brought home. And now we'll go to our final scene.
O you who bring us so much sorrow and have done things beyond belief, a heavy time of woe has come to us, not from mere words, but from your deeds.
It is so obvious, so plain to see the truth of what that messenger proclaimed. I sense a twin-felt sorrow, 2 warriors slain by a brother's hand. A double share of pain has been fulfilled. What is there left to say?
But now, my friends, follow the wind of sighs and let those hands which sweep across your head so rapidly row on and bear away the bodies of the dead in the sacred ship with slack black sails, which always glides across the Acheron to unseen, sunless lands which all men share, a place Apollo's foot will never tread.
But look, Ismene and Antigone are drawing near, coming to carry out a better rite, their brother's funeral song. I do not think there can be any doubt their deep and passionately loving hearts will chant a fitting dirge to mark their grief.
Alas for you 2 sisters too, of all women who bind their robes beneath their breasts, the most unhappy in your brother's fate. My tearful sighs come straight from my own heart. My shrill lament tells how I truly feel.
Oh, you hard-hearted, senseless men, who showed no trust in your own friends and would not rest when troubles came. With your unhappy spears you fought, and now have won your father's home.
Alas, alas, you too who sought to overthrow the walls of your own home and looked with bitter eyes to being the only king, have now been reconciled with swords.
And thus, indeed, the sacred fury of Oedipus, your father, ends her work.
You struck and were struck down.
And you were killed while killing.
You slew him with a spear.
And from that spear you died.
Such a pitiful act.
Such wretched agony.
Let our groans sound.
Let our tears flow.
Now you lie dead.
You did the killing.
Alas.
Alas.
My mind is mad with grief.
My heart groans here inside.
I, you pitiful man.
You too, his wretched brother.
You lie there, dead, killed by your own kin.
You slaughtered him, your own dear relative,
A double grief to talk about.
a double sight to see.
Such sorrow all around them.
One brother lies beside his brother.
A heavy fate that carries so much pain, the awe-inspiring shade of Oedipus. Oh, you dark fury, your power is so great.
A hapless grief which carries our own name.
A triple tide of sorrow.
A heavy fate that brings us so much agonizing pain, the awe-inspiring shade of Oedipus. Oh, you dark fury, your power is so great.
You know her now by what you did.
And you, in that same instant, met her too,
When you came back to your own city,
to face your brother with a spear.
a deadly thing to talk about.
A deadly sight to see. Oh, how I mourn your suffering, my king.
Alas, for both of you, most pitiful of men.
Both gripped by ruinous illusions.
Where shall we put them in the earth?
Wherever they get most respect.
More cause for grief. Alas, for they must lie beside their father.
So we end with this scene before sort of where the play trails off in the full version, which is in more debate about the burial. But I'm really struck by this tone shift at the end, Naomi. Can you help me sort of understand it? Is this the final play in the trilogy? And where do you feel this sort of leaves audiences?
Well, that question has been much debated in scholarship concerned with the authenticity of the final part of the play. Was this actually by Aeschylus or not? So scholars have argued that it's really weird to have these two brand new characters suddenly appear, Antigone and Ismene, who are Oedipus's daughters, the sisters of Eteocles and Polynices. And as a result, some think that the play didn't actually originally end with them, but the words that they utter were actually performed by the chorus split into two. Who knows? There's also a whole other extra ending that comes with the text as we have it, which almost everybody thinks is spurious and sort of points forward to what happens in Sophocles' Antigone, especially. Regardless, just dealing with the play as we have it, it is a big tonal shift, but I find it a very moving one. And I guess one of the reasons I do is because there's a shift to these two individual women. It's not the chorus anymore, the two women to match the two brothers, the two sisters to match the two brothers, with a very different sort of emphasis. We had that big shield scene where it was all about the differences, one warrior against the other warrior and how different they are. Now, with the entrance of Antigone and Ismene, it's all about equality, duality, everything's parallel. So there's all these repetitions between their words, sort of double to see, everything is double, which I find personally very, very poignant as the end of the play. You know, we're left now with just this joint, parallel, devastating death.
So through these sections, we go from in the beginning, so the frenetic behavior of the chorus that's gendered in a negative way, through the middle where we have Eteocles and his confidence in the description, and then we resolve with the double sisters, right? Can you comment a little bit on sort of the journey we take through gender in this play and its sort of representation or response to violence and grief?
Yeah, I really like that question. Well, it's interesting because woman lament in the Greek world, they're associated with lament. And the chorus do that before Ismene and Antigone come in. The chorus starts singing this kind of funereal song, which is what women often do in tragedy, especially Aeschylus's tragedies and Euripides's. And Antigone and Ismene continue that. So at the beginning, we had a kind of, in a sort of from a misogynistic view, kind of typical performance by women, just being really scared and all over the place. And now we have a typical performance by women, but it's actually bringing everything to a close in a really profound way, and in a very, very powerful way that sort of makes us rethink everything that Eteocles has said about them.
Right, and it really speaks to the core of sort of the paradox at the heart of Greek misogyny, right? Which is that there's this constant emphasis on the weakness of women and what they make men do, but on the other hand, there are all the men who are constantly killing themselves in war and creating violence and horror. And so I think we could reread Aeschylus, or we'd have to reread Aeschylus from the end to really make sense of it. Now, before we get to the actors, one of the questions that always comes up with this play for me is why Thebes? Why is Athens? And of course, our extant plays sort of twist our focus a little. But what is the interest in Athens for Thebes, and what are they exploring on the Theban stage, in the Theban setting in their own stage?
Well, so many plays are set in Thebes. I'm sure this question has come up in previous screenings. Thebes seems to operate for the Athenians as a place where Athenian concerns can be acted out, and it's both close but also different. So it's quite a productive stage for dealing with issues of the time. Of course, it's not obvious that issues of the time are being dealt with here because we're in the mythical past. Right. But it is interesting to think about how this play set in Thebes might resonate with contemporary Athens. I know we've already mentioned the backdrop for Athenian audiences of the Persian Wars. There was also a fortification project after the Persian Wars, really spearheaded by Themistocles. And there may even have been walls that could even be seen by members of the audience on the southern slope of the Acropolis, built by this point to fortify the city. So it's set in Thebes, but Thebes so often becomes a kind of mirror for Athens, and the kinds of things that are addressed in the play. The sort of how good are such fortifications, for example, have immediate resonance for the contemporary present of the Athenian audience.
And as I watch it, I think of, who are the leading politicians of this period, right? Would Athenians here in Eteocles, Themistocles, Miltiades in the past, Cimon, like how much would these, leaders of democracies under threat sort of echo there? Now, you said earlier that you're really interested in ancient performances, and I'd like to hear some of your responses to this modern performance, and what viewing it in the Zoom context does to it for you.
This was I've never seen this play performed because it's not usually performed. So this was actually a really incredible experience for me, and brought home the various ways in which aspects of the language that I often think about in terms of original performance context, like the chorus coming on, singing and dancing really frenetically, can be produced in other ways, like having light from different angles and seeing people's feet before you see their faces. It also brought home to me, so for me too, that long middle section of the description of the shields. I've thought a lot in the past about how synesthetic it is, how synesthetic the whole play is. There's just a confusion of senses all the time. And in that scene especially, you have these images of people speaking as if they've got kind of, like bubbles coming from them on these shields. But I've only ever read it on the page. And this time I heard it, and the combination of hearing about these visual images speaking was really effective for me, and it didn't seem as long a scene as a result.
No, I think two things happened with this performance, and one is that the translation by Ian Johnstone is really light and modern, right? And so it doesn't have some of the most Aeschylean of features, namely obscure words, compounds, and let's say asyntactical word groupings, right? So it flows in a way that you wouldn't get with Aeschylus unless you actually had the song. And the second thing, we had marvelous performers who really maximize that light language. So I'd like to turn to them. I don't know, Naomi, do you have any questions for the performers? And I didn't warn you about that, but what's the question that comes to mind?
I'm just really interested in how you went about approaching this play, maybe especially that central shield scene, which is so hard to get to grips with for anybody, and then how to sort of communicate that to a broader audience. Yeah.
So I don't know if the director wants to chime in, or maybe we'll start with Sarah. Sarah, you were awesome as the messenger. I don't know what it would have been like if you could have been outside on a motorcycle, but how did you go? Because honestly, messenger scenes are core parts of Greek tragedy, but they can be so slow and weighty and static. And you made it exciting. How did you do that? What's your secret?
Well, technically I was standing up, which was a good first, I wasn't sitting down for this one. And then when we did the rehearsal, there was that sort of, how do we make these people stand out as individuals? And Paul had the idea of, is there a way we can sort of, use a kind of prop and identify? And then we thought, well, the phone, maybe we could pull images, door prize points for people who can identify the various movie stills that I stole from the internet. And I think it was important for me in looking at the text, just really being clear and having in my head what the shields really looked like, and like being able to describe them in a visual way, because versus just describing them with the language versus just like, oh, he's carrying a shield. So just being sure in my head, I read it several times to be like, oh, it's a shield and there's serpents, or oh, there's fire, and having visual images for myself to refer to. And I made notes in the script like, this is the screaming man, so that I could remember, because keeping them straight too was like, which is the one at the Protean Gate? So it was a bit of just making them all individual.
So lesson one is to do your homework, right? And learn the material. But I think you bring out something that's really important about these images, which is that they are actually visualizable. Like you can get them in your head, right? And this contrasts with sort of famous moments of ekphrasis, which is when you describe art and poetry on the shield of Achilles in the Iliad, or the shield of Heracles attributed to Hesiod, where you just get an entire universe inscribed on shields that couldn't exist. But these are really sort of discrete, meaningful images, right? And so again, you made it lively. Of all the images you showed on your phone, is there a particular secret one that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, so I know they were kind of blurry. I didn't know who this was until my husband like, oh, that's The Rock, and I honestly didn't really know, but he's got a lion head,
okay,
like on his head. So that was, and it was helpful for me to sort of pick out ones. Again, I'm not really great with pop culture, but like this dude, this guy. Just having for myself, like when they describe the young one as barely having a beard, it's sort of like, oh, okay, this guy kind of looks like he could be a youthful warrior man. and there was a particular request from the cast that we find a Brad Pitt. So Brad Pitt from Troy does show up.
I caught that one, but the others, I was with you. I was a little clueless. But no, I like the choice. Like Naomi, I've never seen this play performed, and I shuddered at the thought of just hearing about the images. But Sarah, you definitely brought it to life. Now, one of the most dynamic parts of this play, as Naomi mentioned, is the transformation of the chorus from scene to scene. So Paul and Hannah, can you talk a little bit about the choices in the chorus? We've gotten a little more daring with the chorus over the past few weeks. And this one was the most experimental. What were you thinking? Not that it was bad. Like, I loved it. And on YouTube, they seem to love it too. But walk me through your process of staging the chorus in this way.
I suppose one of the things that we were thinking about, and it was something that Sarah sort of touched upon there, and something that kind of like for all of us to have kept in mind throughout the play was, even though there are these very lengthy passages where we're talking about various things, but there is also sort of impending doom just out on the other side of that wall. And it's really about kind of trying to keep that threat alive all the way through, because otherwise there's a very real kind of potential of you kind of, oh, I've got 30 lines in this speech, I'll just sort of ease my way in and then sort of just spend a bit of time and I'll have a nice dramatic pause here or there. But actually, you don't have time for that, because there are some people knocking on the gate and the knocks are getting louder and louder. So I suppose we wanted to find ways that we could sort of create that sense of panic, of fear, of frenzy at times.
And let the viewer use their imagination as well, which is always stronger. And so do we do it all just completely in darkness and you just hear the voices, or and then you had the idea for feet, which is great, and then you get the rhythm. So that's, you know, that creates. Yeah, and then we were on our feet as well, obviously. So we're out of breath as well. I was out of breath as I was running around, so that helped.
I took the job of standing still with the light. And we wanted to kind of create that sort of, you know, what dramatic states can you do in this sort of environment? So sort of playing around a little bit more with, like, you know, we were just using our phone lights to kind of try and create sort of like halo effects and haze and things like that, just to sort of try and, I suppose, create some of the things that you would perhaps have in a, you know, if you were staging a full production, you might sort of go with that. And with
torches, you know, flashing, what's over there, people shining things on you. Kind of
so Hannah, you not everyone watching knows this, but you've been on the sidelines since the beginning of this project, and you've sort of come in a little bit here and there. How has being this fully engaged for an episode changed the way you see what Paul's spending all his time doing?
I think it's quite wonderful, really. I don't have time to do the homework because normally when Paul is doing these reads, I just kind of collapse on the couch and listen, because I've been battling with the babies all day. But I was quite taken tonight about with how amazing it felt to just kind of jump on the train, and maybe especially with this piece, I don't know, that it just kind of tumbled forth, and was really kind of felt amazing to be a part of, to be connected to it, to kind of fight through it, to try and be heard. Yeah. Don't know if that answers your question.
Did you give the children away for this episode? Are they gone?
Do you know, it's terrible. We've turned the monitors off.
That's not terrible. No.
We hope they're still there.
Who knows what's going on in the other room?
That's how they learn to sleep through the night.
Yes.
Right, now you just have to have a stiff drink and ignore all the crying. And in 2 nights, they'll be sleeping straight through. Please, nobody take parenting advice from me. I'm 2 have survived, so we're doing okay, but right, that's not a pattern yet. Tim, so again, I'm going to keep saying this. My respect for this play was really low until I saw the performance. And when I read it yesterday, I was reading Eteocles thinking, oh my goodness, he's such a bore, right? But yet again, you breathe life into him. The thing that I found amazing was the pacing. Everybody did great pacing in this play, but you really varied it and gave him an energy and a passion that I didn't see on the page. Can you tell me a little bit about your approach to Eteocles and what you saw as his sort of major character interests and constraints?
Well, we read this yesterday as a kind of run through. And I think we all agreed that Eteocles was one of the dreariest, sort of most awful characters we'd come across in the entire series. And so I thought, so my heart sank a little bit, particularly that middle section, because it's so long and it's so wordy. And I just thought, I don't know, I think tonight I thought there's got to be a way of kind of driving the the action, and I think because, you know, any actor will tell you that in performance there's a kind of an added energy, and certainly that helped. And Paul brilliantly yesterday said, after we'd kind of had this really rather boring read of the play, he said, I think what we need to do is we need to really imagine the enemy at the gate. We need to kind of just feel that they're there, and also that our men that we're putting forward are standing in front of us. And that just, I think the idea that there is a war about to happen, the stakes are high in this play, and I think actually just allowing ourselves to think about that kind of gave me a bit of added energy, added oomph. I don't know.
Well, I have not tried to teach this play for years, but I think if I do, obviously I'll give your performance, but also encourage the sort of the reading aloud, the pacing, and then thinking, right, these are rallying speeches.
Yeah.
I think what I also found really convincing about you is the sense that you're not just rallying the Thebans, you're rallying yourself.
Right. And to be honest, that's actually something that kind of happened as I was doing in that first scene. He's such a misogynist. I mean, he's really the worst. I mean, yesterday reading it, I was like, God, I mean, this is something else, isn't it? I mean, I know it's ancient Greece, but still, his attitudes towards women are just appalling. But actually in this, and you know, that is true, and that's a fact. But I think he's so pumped up because, you know, and his entire kind of legacy and sort of, it feels like everything has been leading towards this moment. And I actually thought there was almost a kind of comedy in his manic, crazed attitude towards the women. It's like, I sort of just saw it as these women are just standing in the way, just talking, and this is not helping. And you're women. It's like he didn't know what to say. It was just like, get out the way. I think there's a nervous energy about him that actually was something I quite enjoyed discovering, I think.
I think one of the things we forget about Eteocles is he's young.
Right.
And he's traumatized, and he has to kill his brother. Right. I mean, this pretty much, like, if we try to put ourselves in an Eteoclean mindset, he's had a pretty weird couple of years. Right. And this is a moment where he has a chance to save everything. And I don't know how many of us would end up much better off, minus, you know, the blatant bigotry. So Evie, I have to ask, is Tim taking on the character of Eteocles while you're in a separate room? Did you just?
Yeah, he's not spoken to me or allowed me to speak for a number of weeks now, just to get into character, which I've really appreciated.
You're better off. No. So one of the things that Naomi talked about is how suspect Ismene and Antigone at the end of the play are, how they might not seem like an organic part of the whole play. Tabitha had to leave, so I won't ask you to speak for her. But how did you imagine yourself and your character as part of this play, despite that sort of staggering connection?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, I suppose, especially in this format where I am literally just sitting and watching, completely outside of it with my screen off. But it felt very satisfying listening to the kind of, please be quiet, women, why are you here? Shut up, shut up, shut up. Knowing that actually that's how it ends. It's going to end, this play is going to end with these really beautiful bits of text that feel rhythmically very different to anything that we've seen. The way that the two sisters interrelate and finish each other's sentences, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like there's something really lovely in that reflection. The kind of total difference in, I don't know, power or, yeah. It was nice knowing it was coming up.
And I mean, you and Tabitha as a pair bringing it together, it flowed well, the candles. Whose idea was the candles?
Tabitha.
That's Tabitha. All right, because it really worked well. I mean, altogether, the visual imagery and the lighting in this episode, as they were noting on in the discussion, was really powerful. So it was impressive. Tim, did you unmute to add to it?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think when you introduced this play, the fact that we were doing this play last week, and you kind of prefaced it with saying this was perhaps your least favorite of the 40, or perhaps your least favorite play of all time, I think that gave us just a real that was like a red rag to a bull for us. I think we were like, come on, we're gonna prove something here.
So what I'm hearing is that the crazier things I say about plays beforehand, the more likely it is that you will do something amazing. Yeah, I don't know if we should go there. So one of the people who helps us make these amazing performances is Emma Polly, who helps cut down the play. So Emma, you made some great selections today. Unlike me, you didn't cut everything. Can you tell me what guided your shaping of the scenes this week?
The main decision that really kind of drove the whole thing was slicing off that end. As Naomi talked about, there's like Harold that enters and kind of gives this whole spiel that links us into Sophocles' Antigone, and I kind of wanted to just root us in strictly Aeschylean circumstances. And I've been very much in your boat, Joel, of like, I don't like this play, and I've been soundly proven wrong, so I'm very happy about that. But in the kind of scene selection process and in the notes, in the dramaturgy notes, which the actors received, the real intention was to kind of, if we're in this play that is known for this one really long scene, I wanted to keep as much of that scene as we possibly could, just to honor what this text is and to honor the kind of almost ritual exchanges of like description, reaction, refutation that kind of happened between the messenger and the chorus and Eteocles in the descriptions of the shields. And yeah, just to give that scene enough of a framing and to honor this kind of sort of collapse of energy, how we start off in this like extreme, hectic, frenetic place, and then we come down to something that's very centered and focused, and then into this kind of quiet, very soft grief.
And
Yeah.
I really appreciate the work you did and the actors and Paul with the direction. I haven't mentioned this for about 2 months, but one of my favorite metaphors from Plato for artistic production is the magnet that imbues each piece of metal connected to it with power to get to the audience. But one of the things that this process shows is Plato might miss the fact that the magnets can act as transformers and through interpretation increase the power of the charge, right? Because what you guys have really done with the selection, the interpretation, and then the performance is make this into something completely new for me. And I really cherish that as a gift. So thank you for remaking this play. Before we sign off today, though, we do want to talk again about opportunities for anybody watching to remake plays on their own. I didn't warn Paul about this, but Paul, do you want to talk for a minute about our competition that's starting up?
Of course, yes. Start the clock now. We've launched a competition called Playing Medea. And you can find out all the details about that on the Out of Chaos website, which is the details are listed underneath this video. But in a nutshell, we've chosen some scenes from Medea, and you pick one, film it either on Zoom or in person, depending on what your circumstances are, and then send it to us by October the 23rd. Now, this competition is open to anyone who is at high school or studying at university in the US and Canada. We've been very generously supported by the Society for Classical Studies, by the Centre for Hellenic Studies, and by an anonymous donor, which means that we have great prizes available for separate competitions for the US and for Canada. And shortly we'll be announcing the UK version of this competition. And we're also hoping to get it launched in Greece before too long as well. So there'll be lots of opportunities for people to read their own Greek tragedies online and become sort of part of this wider community.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you everyone for participating today. Next week, and here, I don't quite have a gauntlet to throw down, but it's Euripides Suppliants, 3 o'clock next Wednesday. And I don't know if I've ever read that play. We'll see, right? So I have absolutely no presuppositions about it, except that it's Euripides, which means I expect a little bit of a wild ride. In order to get there, we have a whole team making this possible. I talked to Emma today, our executive producer, Lana Coley. Her husband, John Coley, makes the great images on the posters that are then recreated by Ali and our production team of Ellen, Keith, Janet, Sarah, and the Center for Atlantic Studies for supporting us. Everyone stay safe and take care. And I hope to see you next week for Euripides Suppliants. And thank you, Naomi, for joining us.